The sea has never been a forgiving place, and for Captain Sig Hansen, it's been both a home and a battlefield. For nearly 2 decades, millions have watched him steer the Northwestern through the violent waves of the Bering Sea on Deadliest catch, defying storms that could swallow entire ships. But what few people knew was the silent battle he was fighting off the deck. Rumors had been swirling for years, whispers of declining health, family tensions, and the emotional toll that decades at sea had taken. Fans speculated, crew members stayed quiet, and Sig himself brushed it off, until recently. Now at 58, the legendary captain has finally broken his silence. In a rare and emotional interview, Sig Hansen confirmed what so many had feared, and yet his confession wasn't one of defeat. It was one of truth, resilience, and a man's unshakable will to survive. This is the story of Sig Hansen's journey, from the fearless fisherman who ruled the Bering Sea to the man who faced his own mortality and refused to surrender. And as you'll soon see, the rumors were only the surface of a much deeper story, one about pain, redemption, and the price of a life lived on the edge. For Sig Hansen, the ocean wasn't just a job, it was destiny. Born into a long line of Norwegian fishermen, the salt was in his blood long before he ever touched the helm of the Northwestern. He was barely a teenager when he started working on his father's boat, learning quickly that the sea respected no one. The work was brutal, freezing winds, crashing waves, and 20-hour shifts that tested every ounce of endurance. But Sig loved it. Every roar of thunder, every spray of salt on his face reminded him that he was alive. When Deadliest Catch premiered in 2005, Sig became an instant icon, a no-nonsense captain with a heart buried beneath layers of grit. He barked orders, cursed the storms, and stared death in the eye without flinching. To the world, he was invincible, but behind the cameras, something was changing. Years of stress, exhaustion, and endless danger had started taking their toll. The sea that made him famous was slowly breaking him down. Crew members noticed it first. The heavy breathing, the tired eyes, the long silences after trips that once fueled his soul. Then came the heart attack. It happened in 2016, shortly after another grueling season. Sig collapsed, and for the first time in his life, the man who had faced the Bering Sea's worst storms faced something he couldn't outmaneuver. Doctors told him it was serious, a warning that he couldn't keep living like this. But Sig being Sig, recovery didn't mean surrender. Within months, he was back on deck, stubbornly proving to everyone, and to himself, that the sea still needed him. Yet something inside him had shifted. That brush with death forced Sig to confront the question every fisherman dreads. How long can a man push before the sea finally takes its due? And just when he thought he'd left danger behind, tragedy struck again. Only a year later, he suffered another heart attack, this time during filming. Cameras were rolling when it happened, but the footage was never aired. The crew rushed to his side and production stopped. For days, fans had no idea what had happened, until news finally broke that Sig Hansen was fighting for his life once again. The rumors that followed were relentless, that he'd never return, that the Northwestern would sail without him. But Sig Hansen has never been a man who quits. He returned to Deadliest Catch once more, slower, wiser, and deeply aware that every sunrise at sea could be his last. The man who once battled storms now carried another kind of strength, the quiet courage of someone who knows the value of every breath. The storms of the Bering Sea were nothing compared to the ones brewing inside Sig Hansen's own life. While he spent decades commanding a crew of hardened fishermen, battling 40-foot waves and freezing winds, there was another side of Sig that few ever saw. The husband, the father, the man trying to hold a family together while living on the edge of the world. The life of a crab fisherman demands sacrifice. Every season, Sig would disappear for months at a time, leaving his wife June and their daughters behind. The ocean paid well, but it also took its price. Missed birthdays, empty dinners, long nights of worry. June once said, "You marry a fisherman, you marry the sea too." And that sea had taken more than its share. Over the years, Sig lost friends, colleagues, and even his younger brother Edgar's health began to fade from the strain of the job. The Bering Sea doesn't forgive mistakes, and neither does time. When Deadliest catch turned Sig into a global name, fame brought its own kind of storm. Suddenly, his every move was public. His temper, his family issues, even his medical emergencies became headlines. And through it all, Sig tried to keep his composure. But behind the captain's calm exterior, guilt and exhaustion were eating away at him. Then came the rumors. Whispers that Sig might retire, that his health was worse than anyone knew, that the Northwestern would be handed over to a new captain. Fans speculated endlessly, wondering if the show's most iconic figure was finally ready to step away. But when Sig finally confirmed the truth, it wasn't about fame or fear. It was about acceptance. In an emotional interview, Sig admitted what so many had long suspected, that his body wasn't what it used to be, and that every trip out to sea carried real risk. "I'm not invincible," he said quietly. "I've pushed my luck more than once. You can only fight nature for so long before it fights back." He confessed that his near-death experiences had forced him to reevaluate everything, his work, his family, and what truly mattered. "For years I thought being tough meant never slowing down," he explained. "Now I know it means facing the truth." The rumors were true. Sig Hansen wasn't the same man he once was. But that didn't mean he was weaker. It meant he was finally human enough to admit his limits. Away from the cameras, Sig began to focus more on his loved ones. He found solace in spending time with his daughters, especially Mandy, who had followed in his footsteps and joined the Northwestern crew. Watching her take command gave him hope, a sense that the legacy of the Hansen family would live on, even if he could no longer lead every journey. For the first time, Sig began to imagine life after the sea, a life where calm mornings replaced roaring waves, and family dinners replaced storm watches. Yet even as he slowed down, one truth remained constant. Sig Hansen's bond with the ocean would never be broken. He once said, "The sea doesn't care who you are. It just reminds you who you've always been." And for Sig, that reminder was enough. When Sig Hansen woke up in the hospital after his second heart attack, he wasn't thinking about fame or fishing or cameras. He was thinking about the one question that had haunted him his entire life. Was it all worth it? For decades, he had pushed himself beyond human limits, sleepless nights, freezing conditions, raging storms, and the constant stress of keeping his crew alive. But in that quiet hospital room surrounded by machines that kept his heart beating, Sig realized that the fight he'd always thought was with the sea was actually with himself. The doctors told him it was a miracle he had survived. The damage was serious and another attack could end his life. For most men, that would have been a clear warning to stop, to retire, rest and live out their days in peace. But for Sig Hansen, the ocean was more than a job. It was a calling, a part of his soul. Still, something had changed. This time he didn't rush back. He listened. To his family, to his body, to the silence that had always waited for him on shore. During his recovery, Sig spoke openly for the first time about his fears, the pressure to stay strong, the weight of responsibility, and the loneliness that comes with being a captain. "Everyone looks to you for answers," he said, "but sometimes you don't have any." He began attending therapy and leaning on his faith, two things he once believed he didn't need. He learned to slow down, to appreciate small moments that years at sea had stolen. Watching his daughter Mandy take on more responsibility aboard the Northwestern became a turning point. He saw in her the same fire that had driven him, but also the wisdom to balance ambition with care. For Sig, it wasn't about passing on the torch. It was about passing on the lesson he had learned the hardest way possible. That even the strongest captains need to rest their anchors sometimes. And while fans speculated that his career might be over, Sig surprised everyone once again. When he finally returned to Deadliest catch, it wasn't with the swagger of an unbreakable man. It was with the quiet strength of someone who had been broken and rebuilt. His return episode was one of the most emotional in the show's history. Cameras captured the moment he stepped back on deck, his eyes scanning the familiar waves, the wind howling against his face. For a second he looked like the Sig Hansen of old, but then he smiled softly, A smile that said everything. The rumors, the fears, the doubts, all of it had led to this. Not a comeback, but a rebirth. In interviews, Sig admitted that surviving 2 heart attacks had changed his view of life. "I used to think the sea was everything," he said. "Now I know the people waiting for me at home are what really matter." He began spending more time with his wife and daughters, mentoring new fishermen, and even talking to young captains about health and mental resilience, topics once considered taboo in his line of work. The sea had tested him in every way possible, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And in surviving it, Sig Hansen had discovered something deeper than fame or fortune. He had discovered gratitude. The ocean has always demanded everything from those who dare to face it. Strength, courage, and sometimes even life itself. Few men have given more to it than Sig Hansen. As the sun sets over the Bering Sea, there's a calmness now that mirrors his own. For years the ocean was his battleground, but today it feels more like an old friend, unpredictable, untamed, yet deeply familiar. Sig Hansen isn't the same captain who first stepped onto the Northwestern decades ago. He's softer now, wiser, and more aware of the fragility that lies beneath all human strength. The same man who once pushed through hurricanes and exhaustion now finds peace in sitting quietly on his porch, watching the world move at its own pace. But his legacy? It's far from over. Through his daughter Mandy, that legacy continues to sail on. The next generation of the Hansen family carries forward the same grit, the same unbreakable spirit that made Sig one of the most respected captains in Deadliest catch history. When she takes the helm, you can see the pride in his eyes, a pride built not on fame or fortune, but on the knowledge that she's learned from his triumphs and his scars. To fans, Sig Hansen will always be the fearless leader who stared down the Bering Sea and came back stronger. But to those who know him best, he's a man who finally learned the value of slowing down. In recent years, Sig has dedicated more time to mentoring younger fishermen, teaching them the lessons he paid dearly to learn. He often says, the sea doesn't owe you anything. You earn every safe trip, every sunrise, every moment you get to come home. He's also become an advocate for heart health awareness, using his platform to remind others that even the strongest need to take care of themselves. It's a message born from pain, but delivered with honesty, the kind only someone who's faced death twice can give. When asked if he's afraid of the future, Sig's answer is simple. I'm not afraid of the end. I just want to make sure I've done right by the people who believed in me. There's something poetic about that. A man who once fought the sea, now embracing peace with the same. Humility he once used to face danger. Every ship has its final voyage. Every captain must one day hand over the wheel. But Sig Hansen's story proves that true strength isn't in holding on. It's in knowing when to let go. His fans continue to follow him, not just for the storms and the catches, but for the humanity he's shown through it all. Because in a world of television drama and reality show hype, Sig Hansen has remained exactly what he always was, real. The man who turned danger into purpose, pain into perseverance, and fear into faith. As the waves crash against the Northwestern one last time for the season, Sig looks out toward the horizon. The sea he's battled for most of his life glistens beneath the setting sun, endless and eternal. And with that faint smile that only a man at peace can wear, he says quietly, "The sea gave me everything. Now it's time to give something back, because in the end, legends don't fade with the tide. They live on in the hearts of those who remember their courage." And Sig Hansen's legacy, like the ocean itself, will never truly rest.